During a Sunday edition. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta on Sunday said he will do everything possible to unite the country in his second and final term. 56-year-old President Uhuru Kenyatta begins his second term with a country deeply polarized along ethnic and political lines. Let's first listen in to what he had to say.
To my competitors, and in the spirit of inclusivity, I will endeavor to incorporate some of their ideas. This is because the election was not a contest between a good dream and a bad dream. It was a contest between two competing visions. I believe that those who voted for me chose the better vision. This, however, does not invalidate the aspirations of those who did not vote for me. I undertake today to be the custodian of the dreams of all and to be the keeper of the aspirations of those who voted for me and those who did not. I will be president of all. And I will devote my time and energy to build bridges, to unite and bring prosperity to all Kenyans.
All right, I will be president of all. That coming from President Uhuru Kenyatta himself. Let's begin with you, Dismas. What does it mean, theoretically, for President Uhuru Kenyatta to be president of all in the wake of the political climate we're in today?
Well, when we look at our constitution, and you hear somebody saying that the president needs to unite the nation, then in my view, we are coming up with what we used to do in 2007, that accept and move on. Any good country is supposed to be made up of people with divergent views, divergent ideas. So when you come up with somebody saying that President Kenyatta needs to unite the nation, that sounds more like a civil society language of telling people accept and move on. The people in Kenya who are said not to be united are suffering from one disease, and that was a poorly managed election. Now, if you're able to manage an election so that at the end of the day, when IBC pronounces somebody as a winner, everybody goes home knowing that, in fact, President Kenyatta has won or Raila Odinga has won, then there's no need of uniting the nation, because divergent ideas is what makes for a country to grow. Like, for instance, look at the US. There was a good debate on how to reform their tax system, on abortion, on their international policy, all those kind of things. And people engaged proactively. They were discussing ideas. And at the end of the day, people thought that Trump has got a better vision. Right. And he has pushed out his taxation agenda, and a few hours ago, his agenda has actually moved forward. He was able to convince his people that we need to reform our taxation system. Now, if a country is divided on ideas, then we are making good progress. But right now, when President Kenyatta says he's going to unite the nation and has indicated that his vision won, his vision did not win, because people from NASA did not go to the ballot box to express their views. So it's erroneous for him to tell us that his vision won. And this idea, I mean, like for instance in Nigeria, Chinua Achebe says, when we are political leaders saying, let's unite, unite for what purposes? Nobody in Kenya is saying that we are divided. We are not divided. What Kenyans wanted was a free, fair, credible election, number one. Then number two, inclusivity, which is captured in Article 10 of our Constitution, that if you're going to form your cabinet, it must reflect the face of Kenya, it must capture the interests of the minority. And that one, if the president respects the Constitution that he swore to defend when he was inaugurated for his second term, then not a single Kenyan should be worried. So, Michelle, you need to be very careful when you are people saying that let the president unite the nation, then essentially what you are being told is that the views of the people who support Raila Odinga, who wanted that we sanitize the electoral system, who are looking for another form of democracy. Because, the NASA people are saying maybe it's time for us to review our democracy. Should it be presidential? Should it be parliamentary? And the people who are looking for inclusivity are the ones who are being told that, wait a minute, have now taken over, and you need to take a break. And also what he has indicated there, if he implements it, then probably it's going to make success. Triangulation. That immediately you go into office, if your competition had very good ideas, you incorporate them, you make progress. Bill Clinton did that very well in the US. But the idea of uniting the nation, saying that we are sharply divided, and as the president, I'm going to be the president for everybody, that is burying serious issues under the sand, and we cannot afford to do that.
All right. What do you make of that, Brian? Do you agree with this, that we're not as divided as politicians seem to want to paint us?
I think I just want to start by punching some serious holes on what Dismas has actually allayed or alluded to, by saying that the president does not need to reach out and unify this country, because to him he perceives the country to be united.
No, I did not say that. I said the issues that the president needs to address. Number one is the issue of inclusivity.
I'm coming there.
When you're talking about inclusivity, it does not mean the same thing as uniting the nation.
I'm coming there.
It doesn't mean that.
All right. All right. It's all right. But what I would want to say is that when you talk about the president say that he wants to reach out to everyone, I think he understands the situation that we are in as a country. The country is polarized. The country is actually broken in the middle, in the sense that there are those who are not actually for him, and there are those who are for him. And if you look at the numbers in terms of the turnout to vote, if there's anything to go by, then you realize that there are serious divisions within the country. And any noble president, any noble leader will understand there's that gap, there's that deficiency that that exists in this country. And the only statement that he can say is actually that he's going to look out and reach out to those who are perceived not to be actually singing into his tune. And but one way of doing so is actually reaching out to the discerning voices, and that's the members of the NASA fraternity for that matter. And by reaching out does not mean that he does not understand the situation as it is. He understands that to govern a country which is actually torn into on the top or in the middle, for that matter, from top to the bottom, he understands that for him to have a smooth sail in terms of his administration, he has to do some issues. He has to do 1, 2, 3, 4 issues to unify this country, or to ensure that the pressures are not that much. And one way of doing so is actually to create a government of which is inclusive. By inclusive government means that you reach out even those who are opposed to your initial ideas. And I will not be surprised, Michelle, if he actually appoints some of the members from the opposition to his cabinet list, because that will be also a way of actually, healing the tension between. And another way will also be to, foster a sort of dialogue where you can reach out to members of the NASA fraternity, have a cup of tea, and also have a constructive dialogue, a structured one for that matter, where the issues of inclusivity, as Dismas is talking about, are tabled, where issues of marginalized are addressed, where issues of unemployment, issues of nepotism, issues which are seemingly the boiling issues within his administration. And by so doing, he'll be able now to seal the gaps that are existing in his administration by fostering more unity. And that's the essence of actually him saying that it's going to unify this country. And therefore, when you say that he doesn't have that kind of, according to the Constitution, he doesn't need to reach out, then I think that will be a mistaken statement, because one of the values and principles of good governance, of course, is inclusivity. And it is actually articulated in Article 10 that there are supposed to be some national values to be observed, and one of them is actually to ensure there is cohesion within this country. You cannot rule a country like Kenya as a president, where every day in out there is tear gas all over, trying to, destabilize members of the opposition simply because they are not singing your tune. Therefore, in order for you to minimize those frictions, you have to reach out so that we are not being actually treated to these graphics, and even the international world, which is watching Kenya as a hub for investment, they are getting scared away simply because it's cat and mouth runnings every day. And therefore, for him to actually pacify or to minimize these kind of tensions and the frictions, reach out and bring them closer to you so that you have a smoother sort of flow in terms of administration.
Right. Hezbollah, in his speech there, the president also said, I will incorporate their ideas. And many have had talks of perhaps expanding Parliament, expanding the National Assembly, or expanding the executive to make more space for the opposition, to more empower the opposition. So in terms of incorporating their ideas, are we likely to see what Brian says, perhaps a member of the cabinet being from the opposition?
I think I like the whole thing about reaching out, about being the president of all Kenyans, including those who didn't vote for him. I also must appreciate the way the entire, swearing-in ceremony was done. I mean, it was a big marketing platform for Kenya. You listen to the speech in its entirety, and if you don't know anything about Kenya, you'd think that Kenya is a fast-developing country, if not a first-world country, where the democracy is fully entrenched. The president is talking about issues and how he's going to reach out to even the people he beat on vision. But I think on the ground, there is a lot to be done. There is a lot of reaching out. And just like the Bible says, faith without action is null and void. I don't think we should take a lot from that speech. We need to see the actions and then evaluate the president's commitment to what he said in public on what he's doing. I think Brian is being simplistic, and folks in Migori don't want a Luo to be appointed in Uhuru's cabinet. That is far from the truth. We don't want the cabinet to be expanded to accommodate many people. That will not unite us. We are already united. What the president and his entire team needs to do is to address the issues that divide us. And chief among these issues is the electoral process. He has 5 years to deal with that, so much so that by the end of his term, we don't have issues to do with the election. If he has to include the ideas from NASA and the team that he beat, and there are many, including the ones who are competing spoiled votes, then it doesn't have to be him, including those ideas. We just have to see a situation where it is proactive, that the ideas that were propagated by NASA are actually seen, implemented through the way NASA wanted it implemented. And that does not mean that you have to appoint a NASA principal into the cabinet. It simply means that the folks in Migori, the folks in Tana River, the folks in Mombasa, the folks in Nyeri, have to feel that the resources at the national level are devolved equitably, have to understand that the president is actually addressing the issues of each and every Kenyan in each and every hamlet in this country. We cannot sit and say that we live in a united country that does not have issues if we devolve, national celebrations to counties that still belong to the center. If the people of Migori, for instance, have to feel that they are part and parcel of the national cake, we need to see a lot of things going on in Migori. If the president went all the way to Nakuru and other counties to commission projects, we need to see him do that in even counties that are perceived not to be part and parcel of the Jubilee. It doesn't have to be appointment, but we just need that proactivity in terms of the government engaging with the people directly, in terms of the government involving itself with the governors in the NASA areas, and making sure that whatever these governors are doing has nothing to do with NASA, but it's serving the interest of Kenya. And I think the president has a lot on his plate, and he's better placed. He has good advisors. From that speech, you can actually tell that there are people behind the president who mean well for this country. The next step is just to implement it to the latter and within the frameworks of the Constitution.
All right, Mutinda, doesn't what Hesbon is saying in itself really cement the divisions that we have? Because when he's speaking of, the government of the day working with the NASA county government or opposition-leaning county government, but wasn't devolution, or the very essence of devolution, to get rid of that and ensure that there is equitable distribution of resources to county governments despite their political affiliation? Because, he speaks of the government trying to ensure that there is more development in opposition strongholds, but is that really what's on the ground? Look at counties like Mombasa County. There's massive infrastructure development undertaken in the region, from the port to the airport to the SGR, the Madaraka Express. How do we cement this in terms of ensuring devolution works for everybody regardless of their political affiliation?
I think Hesbon has good, valid points. And from the president's speech first, it's important first to note that the president has acknowledged that there are some issues. Right. He's clearly come out and said that he's going to reach out. And secondly, he's also going to ensure that he has an inclusive government. That must be in response to some of the issues that have been raised, that the government is not inclusive. And that is a positive when the president appreciates some of the issues that are coming from the ground and actually publicly declares his commitment to sorting them out. That is already a good step and in the right direction. Right. And Dismas has said that the main issues here are electoral issues. And Esbon has correctly put it that the president has got 5 years before we get to the next electoral cycle. So I am among the people who believe that we are somehow going to agree on how we need to sort out the challenges around our electoral issues in between now and the next election. As per what Esbon has spoken about, you're right about what is happening in Mombasa. In the last week, let me just quote, probably because I come from that region, the biggest dam that is called Thwake Dam was the Eugene, the cabinet secretary was in Cumberland. Right. He met the three governors, and they are actually agreeing on how it is going to take off. What are some of the issues, the compensation, and that is a very mega project, and it is in NASA territory. So that already is happening. Some of these projects it's just that our politics are such that we sometimes don't want to be very objective when it comes to these things. So devolution has played a good role, but again, we still also need to see that from the national government. And I think the national government is trying its best to do that. Even in terms of some of the ceremonial things, we saw the functions went to, the national celebrations went to Nakuru, they went to Nyeri. They were also in Machakos. We do not know where else. And it was the first time, actually. No government has done that. Initially, all governments used to do these things in Nairobi. So you also have to give Jubilee some credit in taking some actions that are meant to make the country feel like it's one, and that Kenya can actually be in Migori.
Right.
Kenya can actually be in Machakos.
There's a lot of questions as to whether the country really felt as one in some of those national functions that were devolved. I
can assure you that when some of this, like when the functions, the national celebrations were in Machakos, I think it was quite, it was received very well, and the people of the region felt honored to host such. And it is some of these small things that contribute in making people develop a more enhanced sense of belonging. Right. And that is not to say that we do not address the issues. The only thing is that some of these issues need time. And the people we are disagreeing with are those that want everything to stop until some of these issues are addressed. Now, that is not going to be in the interest of anyone. Right. We need the government to be functioning, to be serving Kenyans, because there is clearly need for those services. And at the same time, develop a mechanism that is going to ensure that all stakeholders can input in how best we can settle some of the very highly contentious issues like the electoral process.
All right, dismiss.
You know, Michelle, if you want to treat malaria, you cannot use Panadol. You must identify that there is a plasmodium, and you sort out the plasmodium. Now, for the 50% of Kenyans who did not, or rather, for the about 70% of Kenyans who did not participate in the repeat polls, they did not participate because they had been told by their party leaders that the election was not going to be free, fair, nor credible.
Right.
Now, if you want Kenya as a nation to grow, to be very strong, you must ensure that every vote in Kenya counts. And I think it's incumbent on us not to tiptoe around that issue. That's the issue which is affecting Kenya. When you go to other countries like, say, America or Singapore or Israeli, then you have people thinking to the left and people thinking to the right with their divergent ideas. But in Kenya, that doesn't exist. If you go through the Jubilee Manifesto and the NASA Manifesto, there's a thin line. There's no difference. In fact, if you take the content on a Jubilee Manifesto, you give it NASA colors, people will buy it. And the converse is the case. But our biggest challenge in Kenya here is about the vote, that the vote doesn't count. Even if a President Kenyatta decides to have 50% of his cabinet made up of people from Suna and another 50% from, say, from Akweni, people in Kenya will not think that it's united. Because at the end of the day, people want to say, when I wake up in the morning to go and cast my ballot is valid. If President Kenyatta would have beaten Raila Odinga in an election considered to be free, fair, and credible by all Kenyans, then right now you would be looking at Mr. Raila Odinga and saying, what are these nice ideas that you have that I can bring on board? But if for us we keep on tiptoeing around that issue of that a vote doesn't count, it's the person who counts the votes that matters at the end of the day, then we will be getting the wrong prescription. And a nation that is divided because of ideas grows very fast, because then there's cross-pollination of ideas, you've got divergent views, you go to the National Assembly, you debate, you convince your colleagues, you present your motion, and if people think that your position is making sense, they adopt it. But if we keep right now tiptoeing around these critical issues because of political interest, we are not going to make sense. Because, you know, we've got a very good document, we've got a very good constitution, And the only person who is letting us down is the management of IBC. And that's where Chebukati needs to come in. Because, you know, when you're running an election, you're supposed to ensure that it's as transparent as possible and as inclusive as possible. If you do not sort out the electoral issue, then everything we are discussing right now is a waste of time.
All right, so let's discuss then what President Uhuru Kenyatta needs to do, even as he says he will unite Kenyans. And top of the agenda is, of course, to reconstitute his cabinet. And it's a tall order for him because there are a lot of demands for him there in terms of rewarding loyalists on one hand. On the other hand, he will have to ensure he upholds a regional balance, still without upsetting the opposition or trying to appease the opposition. And then again trying not to upset succession politics all at the same time. Let's talk about that cabinet and how President Uhuru Kenyatta can maneuver that without seemingly, stepping further on the foot of the opposition or trying to appease the opposition. Mutinda.
I thought okay, it's okay.
No, you can.
All right, let's begin with you, Brian. Go ahead.
You're more ready.
Oh, it's all right. Thank you, Michelle. I think it'll be a big balancing act for the president in terms of when it comes to constituting his cabinet. But one of the most important issues that should take precedence is actually the issue of meritocracy. We have seen members of the cabinet actually, being just struggling within those particular dockets in terms of implementation, and dockets which were, initially or previously had been run very well, looking like a dull affair, so to speak, and therefore simply because of the personalities attached to those dockets. Secondly is actually the regional balance. Of course, he has to ensure that the reaching out that he talked about is actually seen also on the cabinet phase, in the sense that he can reach somebody from Luo Kisumu, somebody from Makueni, of course, where he comes from, of course, somebody from the coast, and so on. So to ensure that he actually lives to that kind of statement. The other issue, of course, is actually rewarding loyalty. You always need to have a foot soldier within your camp who is actually able to move with you in the same direction when it comes to battle. You do not have actually to bring people who are going to actually revolt within your system. And therefore, he has to be very keen to ensure that he brings a cadre of CSS who are also going to, champion the Jubilee Manifesto, is going to live to the agenda of the Jubilee spirit, and so on and so on. And then the other one is, of course, the issue of succession. He has to ensure that he puts people, men and women there who are going to champion for an agenda which is actually going to be sustainable, in the sense that he brings people who are also able to champion that agenda. Even when he actually leaves the space, you can see the same spirit will be taken over and over after he actually exits the political space. And therefore, those are some of the dynamics. But again, he has to evaluate, interrogate the performance of the current crop of leaders in terms of the CSS. How have they been able to perform to warrant them a callback? If some of them are, and if you ask me, I'll tell you some are wanting in terms of their performance, of course, he has also to look into ways of bridging that gap by bringing others who are more experts in that particular field, while balancing the other parameters as well. And if you can actually if he can give us the scorecard, and if there is a mechanism that we can be treated into as nations or citizens, as stakeholders, on how they performed in terms of their scorecard, an aggregate sort of score, we would be very happy to punch some holes and say, no, this one did not perform, this one really performed, need to be retained, this does not need to be retained, this has to move, this has to give way, and so on and so on. And that also cements the position of public participation in decision making. The president also has to find a way of also consulting widely, consulting here and there, so that he can also get some divergent views, so that he can enrich or give us a rich kind of crop of leaders when it comes to the mandates that they have to perform.
All right. We'll come back with more on that. So let's take another short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing the value and the legality of the strategy by the opposition to swear in NASA leader Raila Odinga on the 12th of December. Sunday edition takes another short break. Let's listen in to the sound of the week.